Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ask Nugget Show. And today we've got a special guest, Bitcoin Benny. How you going, mate?
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on. Appreciate it.
No worries. We appreciate you being our first guest, and we're going to share a couple of questions from our audience and then from your audience. So let's jump into it, mate.
Sure.
The first question we had was about the Icon wallet and someone trying to send their tokens from before the mainnet swap from their MyEther wallet to the new Icon wallet. Now, this question relates a little bit to EOS or VeChain or a lot of these projects that have had the mainnet upgrade and people have their ERC20 tokens in their Ethereum wallet and they get a bit confused about what they need to do now that they've moved to the new blockchain, their own blockchain, and they have their own wallets now. So how would you explain it to someone what they need to do?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think these days people are getting a little bit better at making sure that the instructions are clearer. You have to follow the steps and instructions. You can't just try and send them off. Quite often, you hear horror stories about people losing their tokens. So through Discord, Medium, Reddit, there's a lot of different places that you can go to find the information, but it is a little bit painful the first time and it's a bit scary because you do think you might lose your tokens, but there's plenty of people out there in the community that can help you, and the instructions are relatively clear. So don't do something that you're afraid of. When you're afraid of making a mistake, ask somebody. You're not stupid. Lots of people have the same queries as you do, and there's lots of people out there that will help you.
Yeah, and it's probably their website or the Medium posts they put out with step-by-step instructions on what to send where, how to upgrade, and then you'll get new tokens on a new blockchain instead of the old Ethereum tokens, which are on the Ethereum blockchain. And once you have your head around that concept, it tends to make it easier, I think, for everyone.
Well, I think if people have got in, set up wallets and started exchange accounts and all the rest of it, it shouldn't be too difficult, but just really important to keep across what's happening in the updates.
You've done most of the hard work already, hopefully.
Exactly.
Next question we've got here is the big four banks in Australia have been pretty open to talking about blockchain. We even see the Australian Stock Exchange talking about we're going to use this technology, it's going to save us billions and be more efficient. Yet we see Jamie Dimon, J.P. Morgan and all the big US banks really slamming this as a scam and a Ponzi scheme. So why do you think the differing stances?
Yeah, look, I think the Australian banks have always had a little bit of a less conservative stance, and I think they do work together. The American banks probably have more to gain from standing apart and being standing up for themselves. They're generally a little bit, they have a lot more to lose. And Australia generally seems to be fairly progressive in passing laws, especially when it relates to new technologies and especially cryptocurrency. So I think it's just the difference in the mindset between the two countries, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I might have said the US banks are more corrupt after the GFC, but now we've seen the Australian Royal Commission. All banks are corrupt, but maybe it's the powers that be in higher up places are more interconnected in the US in terms of they own the media, they own this, that, and the other. And if Bitcoin does take their money, their power, that really does shake things up.
Well, let's face it, there's a lot to be lost for these institutions if this does become as big as everyone thinks it will be. So I think it's in the Australian bank's best interest to try and work with these cryptocurrencies and blockchain providers to try and work out how they can cut themselves in.
And we hope that means there's a lot to be gained for us and you guys out there as well.
Absolutely, 100%.
Next question is in relation to privacy coins. So what's your top pick for privacy coins? Now, Benny, I had you on the channel with the Komodo project that you're involved with, so I'm sure that's close to your heart. But how do you see privacy coins in general?
I think obviously there's a very big need for them, hence there being so many of them. And I think it's our right to have those coins and projects in the space, and I think there is a future for them regardless of legislation and regardless of what happens. And as you know, I am a little bit biased because I do work closely with the Komodo project, but I also closely watch Zcoin as well, and think that's one of the ones that I like a lot.
Yeah, and a lot of those coins are forks of each other. So I've mentioned Zcash as one that's pretty widely used, a good community. I really like PivX. I think they're really innovating in the proof of stake model and proving that you can stake coins and do that privately now, and that proof of stake works on a pretty big scale. And obviously Monero is widespread. It's probably the one that's used on the most websites, and it really comes down to the community and who's using it for their success. So what are your thoughts on governments saying or even exchanges saying we're not going to use these, we don't like privacy coins, what happens then?
I think ultimately exchanges are they have to do what the government dictates, but ultimately it's in their best interest to list whatever's got volume and liquidity and gives them margins. But as far as legislation is concerned, I think there's always going to be a place for them, and some of these privacy coins can easily shift into being security tokens as well down the track. So I don't think there's any problem with that. I don't think they'll go away at all.
Yeah, exactly. You've just brought up something that's interesting. So exchanges based in Malta that don't really have too much, issues with legislation, they're going to list privacy coins, and as long as you can buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, and send one coin to an exchange, and even a decentralized exchange, and it's not going to be hard to get your hands on these privacy coins, even if they're made illegal in certain countries.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that unfortunately there is an image or a reputation that they could be used for unsavoury transactions. But ultimately speaking, anything could be used for unsavoury transactions. I mean, an Uber driver picking up a passenger could do whatever the heck he likes. You can't just taint something with a brush for just a couple of people that do the wrong thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure big businesses don't like some of their banks being able to tell exactly what their money's in there,
Exactly.
and transactions and everything. So,
and competitors. You don't want to know. You don't want your competitors to know what you're doing as far as hiring, firing, moving things around. I mean, the whole privacy element is extremely important for competition for big business as well.
Plenty of legitimate cases. So, what's a couple of questions that you've been getting from your audience, mate?
Are the ICOs from 2017 dead? So we saw a lot with massive raises. Some of them did 50, 60 million in seconds. And we have seen disappearance of some of them, or some of them going to zombie state. So I'll throw that to you first. But the question is, do you think 2017 ICOs are dead?
The question probably it depends, doesn't it? So there's a few aspects to talk about. One, those that raised right in the peak of the hype in December and January have lost their runway in terms of how much money they've got to work with if they didn't sell. And obviously that's going to hurt them in a few ways as well. Now, if those projects are viewed to be dead, developers want to jump and work with the other ones that have more money. I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. But in terms of price for the investors, yes, some of these are down 90%, and some of the projects that I think are quite good are down 90%, just like the bad ones. Now, I don't think the bad ones are going to ever bounce back. I think the good ones are going to bounce back, and some of their market caps are looking pretty attractive now. So dollar cost average, guys, if you've got some money on the sidelines still and you like those projects long term. But yeah, I think it's going to be a struggle depending on what they did behind the scenes and how good their roadmap is.
Yeah, I think for me, I've seen a lot of projects that have raised, say, 20 or 30 million, only having a few million left now due to this pullback. And as you say, they've got no runway. They can't. They're having trouble paying wages and trying to keep up a brave face. And it's hard to hide that from not only your staff but also from your communities as well. So there is a few concerns out there, but unfortunately, I don't think that there's much of a difference between the good and bad projects from a price perspective. Unfortunately, a lot of the bad projects get some good publicity, and they're very good at marketing and shilling the projects.
Yeah.
And some of the good ones that are doing great work on GitHub and bringing out great tech are not actually getting the accolades they want yet. So I think we're still in that gold prospector stage of the market, and I think we'll see quite a lot of those 2017 big projects struggle to regain their all-time highs, though.
Interesting you say that, because some projects that maybe are overvalued, overhyped, can buy these partnerships, and they're buying news and excitement. Yeah. And that does drive things in the short term. Over the long term, it's progress and real world use case that'll succeed. But it's interesting that some of the good projects maybe don't have the money that they deserve. And we saw this recently in terms of ETH just getting smashed, because some of these projects have now got to the point where they might have had 20 mil, as you say. They've now got 4, and they've got to say, we just can't risk it going any lower. We have to sell now, and we should have sold earlier, but we didn't.
Yeah, exactly. And that precedent was set by these 2017 runs because a lot of the projects saw that if they held on to 2, 3, 4 million, that they could have 50.
Mm.
So greed sets in, and it's the same psychology as traders. They think if I hodl, I can make a lot of money. And unfortunately, we still have a lot of traders or the trading mentality running a lot of the projects. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit dangerous as well. So I'm actually looking forward to when a few more people with that more hardened business mindset come into the space.
Yeah, it's funny that the early ICOs, 2016, Augur, DGX, some of these have got 100 million of ETH even after the price decline, and it's higher than their
Yep.
market cap now. So that to me is, I own those because I believe that's quality and they've got a
Yeah.
good chance to succeed. Whereas flip side, the ones that are at the hype, you know, maybe they did go for the cash grab and it's come back to haunt them. So interesting.
I don't think a lot of traders realise that, and I think it's really important that they get to understand that because cash flow and the runway that these companies have or projects have is going to determine their overall success, regardless of how talented the team is.
Just quickly, your thoughts on people saying ICO is dumping Ethereum. Well, I want to take the contrarian standpoint and say there's going to be plenty more ICOs in the future. They've already raised more money than they have in all of 2017 this year. I think there's going to be a big demand for ETH in the future, even if there is a bit of selling pressure, and that's creating a two-sided market.
I think there's definite pressure to bring out a different platform because we do know that there's scalability issues with Ethereum, and also there's congestion with CryptoKitties and other games that have sort of come out and launched on the platform. So, but you also have to take into consideration that a lot of the raised dollars that we see touted around for 2018 are made up of some of the EOS and also Telegram. These were billion-dollar raises. So ultimately, they publish a figure of about 6.48 million per ICO this year. But if you take out the big ones, it's actually more like about 1.8. So I do think there's still plenty to come. But I think that if you look at the true stats, I think that we have definitely suffered this year as far as raises are concerned.
That's interesting. I've never thought about it like that in terms of EOS taking up that big chunk, and they have sold off all their Ethereum from the stats that we see as well. So the market's absorbed $4 billion of sell pressure. Interesting.
Yeah, so I see anything that's raising more than 2 million right now, that's doing the 2, 3, 4. I realise that that's raising more than is the average for this particular point in time, and I'm seeing that those ones have a slightly better chance. But that's still it's hard to raise money now,
Oh
really hard.
yeah, I mean, there's a saying going around in the space now that 5 is the new 50, and it's pretty true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so too, and I think it will be 50 if we play our cards right later.
hopefully. What's the next
Yep.
question you've been getting from your audience, mate?
The ETF.
Yeah.
What is the price baked in? What's it going to do to the price of Bitcoin? And will it have as severe impact or as good an impact as we think it will if it gets approved?
Cool. I'm glad you asked that because we've had a few people commenting, what do you think about Andreas's thoughts that he doesn't like ETFs? And so there's two conflicting opinions here. So Andreas's point is very valid that if an ETF ends up holding a huge amount of Bitcoins and then there's future hard forks, and they can have a very, very big say in that. Now, that's not a situation we want. But if you believe that Bitcoin is going to become this currency and store of value, and or it can be either to different people. If that's being used in developing countries and widely, I don't think that one little ETF in the United States can really dictate proceedings going forward. So at the moment, short term, everyone's focused on this. Everyone wants a big short term move and to get Wall Street on board, and it's good for that money that's possibly going to flow in. But I think we're overstating the effect that it's going to have medium and long term for all the other reasons that I love Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, I think that the one thing that's also important to take into consideration is that a lot of people still find it very hard to get into Bitcoin, to buy it, to set up a wallet, all the rest of it. So I think that what this will do is give people exposure to cryptocurrencies without actually having to take physical receipt. And as a result of that, that will make people a bit more comfortable. And I think that as we're making people more comfortable while we're getting the technology easier to adopt and easier to sort of trade with, I think what we'll find is I think we'll find that that's going to bode well for the longer term. But as far as the price is concerned, I agree with you. I think an immediate jump followed by not much more.
I don't think it's priced in at the moment. I think the market's right in the middle of where it needs to be. It's going to go up a lot if it gets approved, and it's going to go down a lot probably initially if they all get rejected, just a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think obviously the space is, I think it's still healthy. A lot of people are saying,
Yeah,
it's all doom and gloom in the end. But if you zoom out and you look at the overall longer picture in the big game, we're still on the way up.
exactly. But it's interesting the other point you make there in terms of a lot of people don't want to download an app and plug in their credit card details
Mm,
or whatever that may be, take the photo of the license. So you're saying that by someone that can put in a bit of their 401k in the US or their super in Australia, just by clicking a button, maybe that starts their journey of, oh, what is
correct.
Bitcoin? Oh, geez, decentralization. This can be used for other things as well. So,
Yep.
I'll,
So forget price, but from adoption perspective, it's massive.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to end. So, thanks a lot for joining us today, Benny. I'll put a link to your YouTube and Twitter down below, guys. Make sure you check Benny's channels out. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, and I hope we can do this again soon.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you.